So thank you for coming. There's a good audience here, so thank you so much. It is my incredible pleasure to introduce you to Klara Glasova. I know Klara through Seattle Print Arts. Both of us were part of that for quite a while. Klara is a Czech-born visual artist. She went to, pronounce that?
Brno.
University of Technology School of Architecture in the Czech Republic for a bit. And then New York Studio School for Drawing, Painting, and Sculpture, and Hunter College in New York. She moved to Seattle in 1994. She's a mother of two and a multidisciplinary artist working primarily in painting and drawing. Klara is a self-proclaimed fire starter. In 2009, she founded Nepo House, which was a gallery in her home in Beacon Hill, and I believe she's going to talk a little bit about that here. For several years, they hosted the 5K Not Run, which was a great event with artists and a whole bunch of stuff along a 5K route. And she's always interested to see what happens when you place the inside out, invite the outside in, and generally do things backwards, in quotes. In 2013, she received Seattle Magazine's Spotlight Award. In 2014, she received Seattle Art Museum's Kayla Skinner Special Recognition Award as part of the Betty Bowen Award process. The new Foundation Fellowship and nomination for James W. Ray Distinguished Artist Award from the Artist Trust Frye Art Museum Consortium, funded by the Rainier, not the same, Institute and Foundation, whose mission is to fund individuals, organizations, and causes of a charitable nature that will carry out projects and programs of high merit for the betterment of humanity. Wow. In 2015, she was nominated for the Stranger Genius Award, and in 2017, she was a Betty Bowen Award finalist. For those of you who do not know all of this, these are the region's big awards. So there's that. In February, she showed her work, Life on the Sidelines Singles, at Oxbow in Georgetown. And in March, she had a solo exhibition at Linda Hodges Gallery in Pioneer Square. Her work, Long Summer from the Life on the Sideline series, is in Elevation of the Everyday at our gallery here. She teaches at Gage in Capitol Hill. And I introduce you. Please welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda. That was a great introduction. So you kind of touch upon what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about a big collaborative project and also my own artistic practice. And I decided I'm going to talk about the Nepo House project at the beginning to start with, because I think it's super important that artists work together and create spaces that support their own work and kind of help each other out. And this was the base for the project that I started in 2009. Nepo House. Nepo House is, does anybody, can you guess what Nepo means?
It would be open, right?
Open backwards, yeah, that's very good actually. That's so quick. I've had people that worked with me on that project for years and never figured that out, so good. So Nepo is open backwards, and it came in a lot of ways. That openness came to me from thinking backwards through certain established beliefs that I had, like for example, that I don't have enough resources, or that I'm not, I don't know enough people, or I can't do something. And it took me kind of rearranging that and thinking back through those ideas and realizing, no, actually I can do something. This was at the time where I was a mom taking care of 2 children, mainly at home. I was working on my own artwork, so I had my own practice in a limited way, but I really didn't know anybody in Seattle. I wasn't connected to the community, and I felt great need to somehow find that connection with other people, other artists. This was also right after 2008, which, as you may know, there was a big financial crisis, and a lot of galleries in Seattle closed, and project spaces. And this came right after we remodeled our single-family home in Beacon Hill, and because we didn't have a lot of furniture, there were a lot of white walls, and I thought, well, I don't know where to find people, but maybe if I open my door to my home, that people will find me, because here I am. This was the resource that I realized I actually can offer to the community. And so what followed was kind of a huge surprise to me, which is that space, the white walls in my home got used, and over a course of a year, the shows that we put up in our house grew from, 10 artists to 30, and there were different media. Every single room in the house was taken. So there was this, and this was great. This was like a lot of there was a lot of creative energy that kind of people fed and created more energy. But there was still this issue at that point where this was all happening in a small house on Beacon Hill, and there was no sense at a certain point to just contain it within that house. The house was a vessel and something offered as a beginning, but in the end, like what happened after some brainstorming with a group of artists, we decided that this can spill into a larger space in the city, into the whole neighborhood. So we brainstormed, and we thought, what do we need to do? Like, we want to be active, right? Sometimes it feels like artists can't do much and kind of feel passive and waiting for somebody to allow you to do something. And we wanted to counter that with like, well, whatever we can do, we want it to be active. What can we be active in the street? Oh, let's do a run somehow, art and run, and it's all gonna work out. Well, except it didn't, because to do anything in public, like on a street, you need a special event permit, and when I applied for the permit for this new event, it came promptly back saying you can't do anything. You can do anything but don't run. And so at first we were super devastated, like thought, oh, that's the end of it. But then we turned it around and almost as a joke sent the application back with a different name, and the name was NEPO 5K Don't Run, and that application was approved. And so there we were, like creating this new event in the city of Seattle. So I will, this is where we're starting. I picked this slide and I was looking at it. This is from like 2013. NEPO 5K Don't Run, and I was looking at it with kind of thinking of today that it should be the name should be restated as it's all uphill from here, because I feel like either that we really hit rock bottom, or my eternal optimism tells me that it just has to, everything just has to get better from here. That's a little pun on our situation right now. But so this is from the, I'll walk you through some slides, and I'll go pretty quickly because there was tons of projects created over the course of 5 years. It was one-day event, annual one-day only event, where about 50 to 80 artist projects grew along this route from Seattle International District to Beacon Hill. So it covered several neighborhoods and different zones, and all sorts of multimedia art was put up for just that one day. So I just selected few. There's much deeper documentation of this on our website, Nipo House website. So this was usually a start of our Don't Run. And for that, Vis-a-Vis Society, who's Rachel Kessler and Sierra Nelson, are poet-scientists, and they created this names. Basically, they pick up, for each year, they came up with 1,000 words, 1,000 different words. And those words served as you would have a running tag or running label. So instead of number, you also picked a word. But with that word, you were going to travel along the route of the Nipo 5K. So there were some great choices here. And also what happened along the route is that people made little phrases and poems as they went along as invisible slow burst. This was also an opportunity for artists to try something new. So there were people that were working in a certain media, but this was kind of event that was like, oh, I always wanted to do this. Why don't I try it? Of course, you can try it for this. So this is Tony Sonnenberg, who is actually a great ceramic artist, but here he was as a Captain Dirty Bear spreading golden dust in the city of Seattle. This was another great project, is People Don't Walk Through Color, and it was by Susanna Bloom and Chris Buening, and Susanna is a great painter, but again, this allowed her to do something else, and it was colored rice that throughout the day, they started like this, and throughout the day got all mixed up and walked through. So interactive projects often. This is mural. We would get mural work put up that was always kind of nerve-wracking because we could only put it up the night before. The city goes around so quickly and paints it over with gray that we had to guard it very carefully. So this is No Touching Ground in the ID. And this is Sarah Galvin, who is a great writer and a poet. She's in the red. And she was one of the artists that took this event to create a series of performances. Every year she would have one installment. And it always involved one thing. It was a poetry reading that people would be sitting in chairs and watching her read her poetry, but they always had some kind of climax, unexpected thing happen at the end, and in this case there was a banana that jumped out of dumpster and walked away with her. There were much smaller pieces that you really had to pay attention. This one by Diana Falchuk, you had to read with a magnifying glass on the wall, and it says, "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." So true, right? There's another mural by Megumi Shona Array. And there is a Segway Patrol Dance, in case you were wondering what SPD could possibly mean. And there is this performance piece by Mimi Allen, which is called Not So Easy Chair. And the participants, visitors, could come and sit on her lap and have conversation with her, which, since she was stuffed in a chair, wasn't so easy. So that's the title. And then there were some ambitious big projects, like Chris Burnside was refashioning an old billboard. But there were really, really tiny things also on the ground. This is a watercolor piece by Rumi Koshino. And if you can see where that is placed, can you see in this left corner? So that's how people had to really look carefully and everywhere. That often led to kind of funny situation, because I would see people pointing it over there or there and wondering, is that art up there? And maybe, maybe not. And this is sculpture by Francesca Lohman on a sidewalk. It's a plaster piece. And then there were some spectacular vistas along the way, and one of them was over Jose Rizal Bridge that leads from ID to Beacon Hill, and we always utilized the area underneath the bridge. And this was Adam Boehmer created these words, yes vessel, out of bed sheets, he spelled it underneath. And then this is an example of how it was used differently on different year. The same spot, Rebecca Cummins created the piece Blue. There were a series of circular round mirrors that reflected the sky. There were actually, that created the blue color, and there was a path created with them. There were some other artists that used this event to create a series of work, and one of them was Julia Freeman, who created a series of interactive works that visitors could often touch or observe people, and in this case, they were watching, there was a piece about labor, and they were watching hands, many pairs of hands that were doing and undoing through these little windows. There were some artists that used existing artwork along the route. This is the Equality sculpture in Dijon Park, and this was Justin Duffus and Tara Atkinson used it for their project that was combining text and paintings. And this was a piece also in Dijon Park. Max Krausar framed a room or cabin in a park, and then he karate kicked and jumped right through it to a big surprise of visitors. And the reason he could do it and not end up in the hospital is that all those pieces of lumber that look like 2x4s were actually foam. So he painstakingly painted each piece to look like wood, and then so he can perform the destruction. We also had, every year we would get new set of flyers that would be posted on telephone posts by Nathaniel Russell, and they were often really absurd messages that people were actually finding months and months after, like, here is Pierre, he's the opposite of lost, don't try to find him. And here is another piece. People often made pieces that were very site-specific along the route. So this is two artists, Aaron Aces and Keith McLean, and they found this stump on Beacon Hill and decided to recreate what the trunk used to look like, and it was an interactive piece that people can get inside. And this is also on Beacon Hill in Empty Lot, a piece by Maggie Carson Romano. She installed a door jamb with a door and two revolving fans. And as the fans moved the air, the door was just continuously opening and shutting itself all day. And this is Max Krausar again, and he's another piece called Carson City. The premise, the test was really to see if he buried himself in a parking strip, and he wanted to see if he could free himself with just a spoon in his mouth. He didn't believe that he could do it. I didn't either, but he managed to get out. He said once he was able to, it took a long time, but once he was able to free his arms, then it was, I would say don't, like we had a spotter checking on him during the day, so don't try this on your own. There's beautiful performance by Eric Aguilar, and this is New Animals performing durational piece on the stairs. There was few favorite places on Beacon Hill, which was this concrete garage that we've always used for different projects. This is Alice Gosti performing inside. This is Hanita Schwartz who did animation and blue bubbles on it in the same place. This is Garage Rock by Zach Bent, so a sculptural piece. And this was the amazing performance by McFam, Una Premidi d'un Femme, and he performed on this pink Chrysler, or that was the car that was parked there. It's one of those cars that's been in the neighborhood for 10 years and hasn't moved. Maybe you know those. And then I'll kind of in closing, there's Graham Downing. He got a few industrial ladders and placed them at the end of Nepo in the intersection and played God. And you could climb up and play game of slaps with God. And this is kind of the last moment, like poof, really how Nepo ended in 2000, the last Nepo 5K ended in 2015, and the last piece to close the series of events was this sky writing piece by D.K. Penn, and there was a Time is Memory spelled in the sky above Seattle. Maybe you missed it, but maybe you got a glimpse of it. It was right above. And okay, welcome. So this was amazing. I wanted to talk about this because this was really formative and important experience for me as an artist, because I got to work with so many talented people and on so many projects. It really opened up my eyes and the ideas of what's possible, and it was great to be part of this creative community. There was this other part of the project that wasn't so fun, right? There was a lot of admin hours of trying to get funding, writing emails, organizing, getting all sorts of permits and licenses. So anyway, I always needed some kind of outlet after all that, which meant that I would sneak a piece of my work into the Nepo 5K somewhere unannounced. And this was at the time I was working in ceramics, and I was making pieces that were kind of reflecting a domestic environment. So I would do ceramic socks or underwear that are dropped on the floor, and when I had them at a show, they often got stepped on. So there was this like ongoing frustration for me at the moment. On one way, I didn't feel like they belong on a pedestal, these kind of objects. They needed to be on the floor. On the other hand, it was impossible to guard them and have people not walk through them and break them. So this was my therapeutic piece, where I created a welcome mat out of porcelain, and it was meant to be stepped on. And so I placed it on a route, and this was afterwards, and it was exactly how it was supposed to be. No regrets. So I'm gonna switch now and talk a little bit about my work. You guys are free to ask me questions afterwards about Nepo and all that. So I work, my own practice is kind of, it's a circular thing happening. I work in different media. I usually rotate them. And I saw the same way there's a circular kind of motion in terms of how my ideas develop. So I'll talk about one of these larger projects that spent several years for me, and it's called Life on the Sidelines. This project came about again from a certain place of frustration, because my kids are really into soccer, and I spend so much time on the field, and often, I mean, I love them, I love supporting them, but I could imagine being other places, for example, my studio, which wasn't happening. And so there was a point though where like I could transform my point of view, and that became when I read in an article this phrase that really resonated with me. be the best prisoner you can be. And out of that, I was able to kind of step back and see where I'm at, and I made work about that place. So I used the place where I'm at and just went with it. So this was kind of literally stepping back and making a series of work about parents standing on the sidelines of athletic fields day after day, Saturday after Saturday, these so many weekends. I didn't put any players on the field, so I wanted to be about the onlookers, the people that are there to watch, and they're usually the ones that are never the center of attention. The action is somewhere else, but I was curious what happens to those people that nobody is looking at and they're not expected to be looked at. So I developed this series of large scale watercolor paintings. They were 6 to 10 foot long, and there was an interesting thing that also happened that I don't consider myself a landscape painter, and I probably wouldn't go out and just set out to paint landscapes, but there was this other byproduct of focusing on the fields that made me really look about the place where we live and the kind of the meeting place of the man-made and the nature around here in the Northwest. There's kind of everything seemed to be right there in front of me. So I created a series of these paintings, and they were for a show at Brian Ono Gallery in 2014, and you can see they were situated in a room that they wrapped around the viewer in a way. I imagine them like screens, like frames of a film. And the film, there's really not much happening, but the viewer was inside of that. And it was just all around. The only difference really among those paintings were just like one parent moving, from one foot to another, or just very slight differences. So that was, I also created for this small ceramic figurines. I was thinking, the bobbleheads, like the famous players, sports people get those bobblehead figurines, and I thought of these kind of like Go Team Parent figurines. So there was a pause, and I wasn't sure, and that often happens in my work. I reached a certain point, and I wasn't sure if I'm gonna come back to this idea, or I was working on some other ideas and other topics that were interesting to me. But something happened again in 2016 or 17, and I kept coming back. Maybe one of the reasons was that I was still spending it. My time on the field didn't end, so I was taking pictures and getting a lot of materials, and I started looking at it again, and for some reason what I was interested in was isolating the individual people. Like I was much more interested like who they are, and a lot of it isn't that I know who they are, but I wanted to kind of get closer to these characters. So I made a series of drawings, and then I'll just go through them. These were also monotypes, so this is how I switch from different media. I would do a drawing, then I'll do some monotypes, and I really wanted to get closer to the actual person in a way that would close the distance between me being a faraway observer again to somebody that's part of this whole setup. And that also, I wanted to get closer to painting and more physical, so that meant changing the scale, and I went back and created a series of almost life-size paintings. So these are about this big. And what started also emerging in this series was that I was really interested, I was picking out images and people that were wearing blankets, and I think that the reason again, there's not a lot of reasons when I work. It's often intuitive, kind of gravitating towards something, and then through the work, I figure out that there's something behind it, and I kind of discover certain tendencies. So this was that I was drawing blankets, people wearing blankets, and what does that mean? That means that again, it emphasizes this idea that they're not expected to be looked at. You don't go out on the street just wearing a blanket typically, right? If you think somebody may look at you. So, and it was this idea about surviving to uncomfortable, long, cold situations. So there was something more immediate and kind of more intimate about looking at, drawing these people wrapped in blankets. So this was kind of culmination of this set of paintings. I had a show in January at Oxbow, Seattle, and I made this. My studio isn't that big, so I made these, and I could see maybe 2 or 3 at a time when I was making them, but never the whole set. And I was really happy to actually have a space where they fit in perfectly, and I could line them up and show them in a way that I always envisioned them. And that's, I think for me it's important that each painting stands on its own as a piece, but for this work, I just wanted those paintings also stand around, not be hung, just stand around like the people would. So this is how they were presented. There's some more work from that same show. There's more. And this is the part 2. I mean, this was kind of the second. It was still same body work, but this one was presented at Linda Hodges Gallery just last March. Well, last month, March, yeah. And there were just 2 big paintings, part of the show, and monotypes, small works on paper and monotypes. It was. There was something, these 2 are the last 2 paintings in a series that I have done, and I was thinking about it a lot, how they were pointing somewhere else. So the show was called Looking Forward, and it kind of was a reference to also my ideas changing or developing about the project itself. This one is called Oceanic Feeling, and the name Oceanic Feeling means being one with the universe, kind of being part of something bigger. And I felt like this painting started to point to another place that was more universal to me, even though it was still concrete setting. It just pointed to something that was more common, just common human experience of kind of a moment of pause, of contemplation, of looking and thinking what's ahead. And that's in a way like my understanding of what does the word universal mean is not something about being out there in a space, but more like universal as a universal tool, and that is tool that fits more than one purpose, and it's a common tool, right? So in that sense, it felt like that's where the paintings were pointing me to think of more kind of bigger or more common human experience that can be taken out of the field to really any situation, and most people have experienced it sometimes in their lives. Okay, well, then I'm going to skip to a brand new work. It's another kind of strain of thought that goes back a few years, but just started to come into focus for me. And this is a kind of new idea or body of work that I'm just working on. I don't have everything figured out, but I know that the center of the idea is this brick. It's brick wrapped in butcher paper, and I named it Pugilist. It's actually a real brick in my studio and helps me around to hold things down. And Pugilist is really helpful, but it can be also, it can be used for building, but it can be also used for breaking something. So the idea behind it is actually 2 bricks, 1 for each hand. And I'm calling this pugilist, but I'm really thinking of a female pugilist, and what does it mean to be a female or a woman fighter? And I'm exploring through this. This is just the beginning of certain ideas about how do you create this narrative and what does it mean to be a woman fighter. And to kind of tie into that is I'm looking at the myth and mythology and myth making throughout history, and certain stories that there's really kind of evil female characters in those stories, but I'm wondering, I'm kind of looking into what does that mean and who's telling this narrative and how has it been passed down. So there's new images coming through that maybe will make sense at some point how they come together. But so this is called Judith, and it's a big monotype print. Those are brand new works. This one is called Siren. And part of this work is also big image transfers that tie in my own kind of, I paint, it's a complicated process. I paint something and then I cut it out. I step into the picture myself to reenact the actual image, and then those are basis for more work. So there's again this circular thing that's feeding. So this is a image transfer of a certain performance and a painting, performative painting, I guess. It's called Chimera. And this one is another part of this new series that is called Odalisk, but as you may notice, it could be the Monet Olympia or any of those images of how women were portrayed often by men, and this was a part of a performance. I'm talking about performance, but I also often perform for myself only in my studio, and it's kind of crazy. Like, you don't want to knock on a door when that's happening. You would be scared. And I take pictures throughout the process. So I was trying to be sexy in a hazmat suit. You tried that? It's a tall order. Yeah, so anyway, and it's also this image kind of shows the layers of another projects that are wrapping into one another, and it comes from so there's everything kind of keeps circling back into the work. That's what I'm trying to, I guess, explain. This one, there's part of this project, and you'll see when I come back to it a little later, is also wrapping in another project, which is that I got into. It's called Free Couches, or Free Couches Aprons, and I went around the neighborhood and started photographing these amazing free couches. Yeah, good stuff. And what I did is, there was, again, I didn't know what's in it that's holding my attention, but it certainly was holding my attention, so I paid attention. And I decided to make aprons, make a pattern out of the free couch photos and make aprons. And through the process, I realized that there's, again, similar things happening as what interests me in people being wrapped in blankets. The similar thing is going on with the free couches, because there's something that's supposed to be hidden and inside and not really visible to public, all of a sudden exposed and put out on a street. And a similar way I started looking at the aprons and why aprons, because there's something that typically are worn by women and they're used for house labor, so it's hidden labor that nobody sees, the work that's being done inside. And again, it's not your typical choice of wardrobe to walk out in aprons. So I figured that I'll bring, since the couches were out, I'll bring the aprons out too. And at the time, I got a grant from the New Foundation to do research and travel in Europe for a couple months, and I thought, oh, that's a perfect project to bring with me. I can just pack a batch of aprons and see what happens. So I took them on a tour, and I would ask people, and it was when I encountered sometimes family, friends, but sometimes total strangers, and I would ask them to put them on and do a performance for me, and then I photographed everywhere I went. I would collect a bunch of photos, people wearing these aprons, and there's another example. And then what happened when I came home, I found a perfect couch 2 blocks down the street from our house, and I took it and I reupholstered it with all the people wearing aprons, wearing couches, and I put it back on the street where I found it, and just in time for the last NIPO 5K Don't Run. Thank you.
How did your family feel about you opening up your house for, just kind of people to come into?
Oh man. Yeah, I had to bribe them, especially the kids. We didn't have TV, so they were promised a TV set if they can put up with this show, or if it's okay to have taxidermy squirrels in their bedroom, or project that involved 100 eggs. Would that be okay? You can watch some more soccer shows. Yeah, so it was and that's why kind of I'm joking that I kicked the artists out, and I had to. It was kind of, we did full year. For the first year we did 4 shows, and they were big shows where every room was taken, and it felt like moving 4 times a year, and everything had to be moved, whatever furniture we had. And then after that we scaled down and had these shows called Little Treats that were just in our front room, but we had artists cook for people, so that's why the Little Treats. And that was it was kind of a good solution for another year, and that was more manageable. Also, artists liked it a lot. They don't like to stand around at the opening, so they had something to do in the kitchen, and it all worked out. But after that, yeah, it was kind of the thing that wasn't possible to maintain over a long period of time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about what kind of prompts or directions you gave to people to perform in their aprons, and what those performances were like?
There weren't really much other than line up. Like, I thought of them like kind of these odd family portraits where everybody just lines up for a photo, and but this was often, I might have known, like I would go somewhere, maybe I had 3 friends there, and we would then, sometimes it was a restaurant, and we would ask everybody else, like, who wants to be in this photo. So it was like it kind of generated more people being part of it just by people being willing and curious and willing to be part of the project. Yeah.
sort of seems like you take off this, from this place of the awkwardness that we all feel and sort of run with it. What? Which is why we're all sort of laughing. And I think that that's why we all sort of respond so nicely. I guess.
Yeah, there's some very awkward situations, yeah, for sure.
How many times did you do this don't run, and how did the community's perception and involvement change as from when you started it to the most recent incarnation of it?
Yeah, so we started it in 2011 and it ran for 5 years. So it was that was a good run for us. 5K, 5 years. And yeah, it changed a lot because at the beginning we had a real trouble explaining what what this is that we're doing, and I had to also get grants and funding, and that was a real problem at the beginning because we had certain vision, but how do you communicate this vision before it actually happened? And we did some workarounds around it. We infiltrated Love 'em or Leave 'em Valentine's Day 5K race around Green Lake, and we had our own camera guy, and we put t-shirts together saying NIPO. This was before there was any NIPO 5K, but we all had t-shirts saying NIPO 5K, and we pretended doing weird stuff as the real runners were running by, and we made this little reel to help us solve this event that wasn't really event yet. So and get grants. So over the course of 5 years, there was real, people took it in the neighborhood along the route. They really kind of responded and took it as their own event. So there were a lot of people that, kids and other neighbors that would either help us, they would provide electricity or any kind of services that they could, or they're actually, we were doing it in their yards or garages, and there were some people that participated too from the neighborhood. So they really I feel like the neighborhood adopted it in a way as their event, because nothing ever happened on 18th Avenue South in Beacon Hill, and there was this massive event. So yeah, it was, yeah.
Do you have plans to do another sort of community-based event?
I don't have plans now, no. It's, I feel like this is the kind of thing that really requires everything and put in energy and to make this happen. And it was all super positive for me, but there was this other part which I couldn't basically work on my practice as much. And it wasn't just my effort. There was actually, which I should mention, we were a team of 4 artists and curators: Sierra Stinson, Zach Ben, and Sarah Russell. And we put this whole massive thing together every year, and there was only so much I knew I could ask of any of us to contribute. So I view it more like maybe something will come up in the future again, but I'm sure there's other artists that will take the baton and make some other things, but I think it's super important to just grab it for a little while and run with it, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you know when or why the way you work with understanding your work retrospectively and understanding what your work is about through making it?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know when you realized that, or why you work, or why
I don't know why. This is I don't know if, you're all artists, but there's a lot of uncertainty. I feel it all the time, like I'm out on a limb because I gotta follow some hunch, but I don't fully understand that. It's not like it's pre-planned. Only through longer period of and working through the process, I start to understand. So there's a lot of trust that I have to trust that this is, and sometimes, it leads nowhere. But often if you stay with it long enough, it'll connect to something deeper that maybe I wasn't even aware, like unconscious kind of things that I'm gravitating towards that I'm actually observing, but not realizing it unless I work through the material. So,
Question. One of the pieces in the gallery you have, it's the people standing.
yes.
And then their shadows are they're radiating out. I really liked how the shadows are like a part of their character. I just wondered what was that, kind of what your thought was with that, or you just like the pattern, or?
Yeah, I think there were, you end up, I think that came through the work more anything. Like of course, there's things I can talk about what, everybody has their light and their shadow and all those metaphors. I feel like they apply, but they only come in the back door somehow through, again, doing the work and like letting myself do the things that I really want to do, and that ends up emphasizing certain aspects of what I'm looking at. So I don't know if that makes sense. There's no like grand theory around it other than once I know that's where I'm going, I might push it even more.
It just seemed like the sun would have one direction, but like if it's something lower, it radiates. I just wonder like you had like an alternate kind of light that kind of did that.
No.
I just really liked that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, Amanda. What's your method of image transfer?
I use medium, acrylic medium and paper and laser Xerox copy.
And rub it on?
Rub it on, yeah. And the ones that you saw, it's kind of, I knew that method actually existed, but I never tried it because I thought there's a certain look to the work. But once this was kind of inadvertently, I discovered it through, I had a Hedreen gallery residency, and they said, you want to do a residency? I was like, yeah, it's a Xerox residency. I'm like, Xerox residency? Okay, I guess I could do Xerox. So the part of the residency, I had access to a Xerox copy machine, and that helped me get tons of photographic material out of my computer, which was stuck there, and the ideas were stuck there because I didn't have a way to quite get them out or didn't know how to manifest them, and that led to trying that process and playing with it in a way as if it was painting, so intentionally, leaving brushstrokes, so kind of playing with the media.
How do you keep your vision when you don't have enough space? Like with your large paintings of the blanket people, you said you didn't have enough space, but you kept going with it anyway. So how do you keep just...
Well, I was crossing my fingers that it'll work. And actually it was an interesting thing that happened. The way this Oxbow show came about was I'm gonna go back there in June and do another residency and show, and this was supposed to be just a short period of time. They said you can use the space to look at the work you did and figure out what needs to be done. And so that was kind of my plan, but what happened is I actually loaded one carload of these paintings, everything that fit in the back of my Subaru. I brought it in and I stood them up, and then I spent the rest of the day explaining to people why this is not a show. Because they fit. Like, I think I was lucky. It's the one time in life you get lucky with a show. Otherwise, it's usually the other way around, like nothing works, and then you have to, patch it up. But so this was kind of this thing that was just perfect space for the work. And
If
Thanks.
you want to talk a little bit more with Klara, we're going to go over to the gallery. We're going to close down here, and then we're going to walk over to the gallery. So please feel free to spend a couple minutes with her there.
Thank you.